largest Joomla consultancy agency on the planet, some of our brands are Red Web, we have people in 12 countries, and I'm also the founder and idea guy behind our ASEA contextual marketing platform, which is built on top of Joomla. So, but we'll not talk so much about our products and services in this session. We'll talk more about the mindset of, which is also the foundation of why we're building what we're building. So let's lean in. So we just jumped a little. We'll jump back. So this is a graph that was made by Deloitte, which is a very well-known company. They went out with a lot of data and tried to analyze the gap between technology and human beings and organizations. And then they also, at the bottom, they have the public sector. So being a guy who likes to get things done, I'm not so focused on the public sector myself, but the general point and tendency is here, the gap between people and technology is expanding. And the natural result of that, because people cannot keep up with technology, is that the gap between technology and companies is actually even bigger. So what happens if the gap between the companies and technology is too big? The companies cannot continuously develop and change how they do things because they don't master the technology. So we spend a lot of time on looking on this curve and trying to figure out, well, what can we do to change that? And part of that is maybe considering how can we ensure that the people that are working with technology, the people that are working with web platforms, are continuously growing and learning and improving and being more productive while working in the web platforms. The numbers today in medium and large size organizations is that people have a web platform for around 3.5 years. After 3.5 years, the web platform will be 3 to 4 generations too old. So it needs to be upgraded or migrated. And of course, as Joomla extension developers, a lot of us has experiences with this. So the problem is that when you're 3 to 4 generations behind, then you have a gap in technology. But the relative cost of upgrading or migrating is actually so high, so you often, we just swapped over out of the blue. I think we have a hidden ghost pressing the machine. So the cost of upgrading or migrating is so high that often a customer or an organization will actually change platform and or supplier. So having retention and keeping your customers within Joomla, within your platform, is very hard under those circumstances. So that's one of the aspects we're looking at and figuring out how can we change the way that people are working with technology, how can we continuously always upgrade it and deliver the new features and new technology, but in the same system so that the people who are actually working with the platform in the end customer level is constantly evolving and getting closer and closer to technology. And of course, I mean, when we went from Joomla 1.5 to the 2 series, we had huge migrations and everything was different. So, but let's see. We'll jump a little further in here. So digital transformation also means that instead of doing a traditional, let's say a project, you're implementing a new website for a client, then you do a big project and put it online, and then you don't do anything for 3 or 4 years, right? And that is perhaps not the best way to do things. So we need to be more circular. So we need to have a strategy at first, if that's possible, or even better, we can have insight from day one. And when I say insight, I actually mean that if you build an organization or a business where your main focus is listening to the behavior of your end customers, if your development is driven on behavior of end customers, then you will succeed. And a fun fact is that 50 years ago, the Fortune 500 in the US had an average lifespan of 40 years. Today, the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company is 8 years, and that number is getting smaller and smaller. So an instance could be Kodak. Kodak, the company that made films for cameras. Kodak at some point had 200,000 employees on the planet, but But then Kodak didn't realize that the changes in demand were happening. People didn't want films, they want digital cameras and stuff like that. So suddenly, over a few years, Kodak went from 200,000 employees to 2,000, and then they were dead. And we see this time and again because people have a position in the market, and then they think they're doing well, and then reality changes because people's demands and the behavior we see in the demand chain of the end customers are different. So we cannot accommodate these things, learn from them, alternate our strategy, get the experience out of it, and then create value for our end users. Then we're not staying alive. And if we apply all of this mindset to building websites, then having the ability to launch a web platform and then actually looking at the data, getting smarter and wiser based on those data, based on behavioral patterns of the website, and taking that into making the next small version of the website, and continuously developing, creating features, and adopting and modifying the website so it creates more and more value. Then that's the way to do it. So so this is a circular and different process than you would normally do a lot of websites. I can say for us, today we launch the platform and then we start to collect data. And we actually record all of the behavioral patterns on the website. So any visitor, we record the full behavioral pattern, and then we use that to modify and adjust and personalize the websites. And then we constantly get more data, we get smarter, and then we start to adopt and change. So there are two major aspects of digital transformation. Of course, this business aspect, the actual company, the organization, and then there's the digital aspects of it, of utilizing the new technology, and how can you do that in your company. Some things in digital transformation can be about maximizing efficiency or productivity. We help a lot of customers that have manual processes. So like something like their images, then they have some shared folder in the organization where they have all their images just randomly dropped in a folder. And of course, if you need to spend 30 minutes each time to find a picture to use in your marketing or your website or whatever, then you have a very ineffective process. It also means when you hire new people in your organization, they will have to spend a lot more time learning how to figure out how to do things. So we can then structure and sort the images in a DAM system, a digital asset management system, and connect that to the website and maybe also to the marketing department. Then suddenly we have a more structured form. We're saving a lot of time, we're saving a lot of processes, and we're making things easier, onboarding easier and stuff like that. So when we have different systems and we work with digital transformation, then the digital aspect is very much about how can we connect the different systems and value chains that are meaningful for the organizations. Of course, the biggest impact of digital transformation is a mindset change with the people in the organization. A classical example is that most production companies, their category trees for their websites are built based on their categories in the ERP system. Because the ERP system categories are there to create a revenue statistics or turnover statistics of different groups of products. So then when they put it online, we actually see that they put the same categories that they have in their ERP system online, because the way they look at the world is based on how they perceive themselves and their business and how they're thinking. But if you really want to succeed online and you want to succeed as a business, you need to change the way you look at the world so it's not inside out, but it's from the outside and in. So identifying people, understanding and identifying different segments and then pulling things together so you do it different is very big. But it requires that the people in the organization change the way they are thinking. So part of also doing all of this transformation and doing it circular is that you're constantly evolving, you're constantly getting smarter and better. So that's some of the main aspects. But all of this is meant to create a lasting insight. So let's say that when I have a visitor on my website and I open up their visitor flow, I can actually sit and see the full behavior. So I see a customer from a specific industry visits my website. If I trace which company it is, then I can see they go into a certain area, then they go a different place, but they don't fill out the newsletter form, or they don't apply for a white paper, or they don't contact me. So what's the behavioral tendency? What's the trend that is coming out of the data I'm collecting? Well, the goal of all of that is to create an insight that would make it possible for me to change and modify and individualize my website. So if I have 7 different kinds of users, 7 different segments, 7 different personas visiting my website, well, then I'm actually doing different variations of my website. I don't know what my laptop is doing today. It seems to be changing by itself, but that's how it is. It's a magic laptop. So the insights and actually understanding what is going on is essential. Let me give you a good example. I'm sure everyone in here has heard about disruption, right? Disruption. And Uber is mentioned, Airbnb is mentioned, etc. But there's a limit to how many infrastructure, peer-to-peer companies you can create, right? But at the end of the day, what did Uber do? What did Airbnb do? They actually listened to the market. They listened to demand in the market. They took that insight of seeing a specific demand in the market and they converted that into a product. So I think that is a really strong thing to do, because then you're completely driving your evolution or your development on user requirements and needs. And of course, 20 years ago, we would see huge marketing campaigns, branding campaigns. People would do national TV commercials and stuff, and almost no company does that any longer, because it's really, really hard to make it worthwhile. So instead of spending 20 million on a national TV campaign, well, then maybe you actually go out and you spend more time understanding your users and getting an insight to create a more valuable product that will then sell more to people. So as we write it, the unique behavioral data and patterns we see, and that's actually what we do when we work with our platform. We actually create these data patterns. When you see an interesting pattern, you can checkbox it and create a new pattern, and then you can control your entire Joomla site based on that. So people with a specific behavior can see one version of your website. People with another behavior can see a different version of your website. And that creates drastic results. I mean, we're talking conversion ratios going up by 400, 500, 700%. But I mean, it's also pretty simple. I mean, how did people build successful companies and organizations in the real world? They did it by engaging with their customers, having a high relevancy when they talk and speak with their customers, communicating at an eye-to-eye level where they're saying something that is meaningful and relevant. So then what did we do the last 20 years with our websites? We did one version of our websites where we told the same story to all the 100 people visiting, and then we expect it to be just as good as in the real life. But hey, having a conversion rate of 1% in your real physical store is not a success. If you have 100 people visiting your store, a retail store, and the 99 goes again without buying anything or even talking to you, then you are failing big time. But on our websites, we are accepting that 99% of our visitors are leaving again, and we have no fucking idea why. Excuse my language, but it is insane. So we need to consider a different way of building these platforms, of actually utilizing all the data we get. We get all the data. It's right there, and then using it to get smarter and doing something different. So one of the things I also have on the slide here is engagement tracking, and that's actually quite interesting. Traditionally, when we look at Google Analytics, we would often look at how much time they spend on a website and how many pages did they look at. Oh, they had 18 impressions on our website, 18 different pages, and they spent 4.5 minutes. That must be a really, really important visitor. Not really. It could be a guy that was just lost, or maybe he was online for 50 minutes because he went out to the garden to mow his lawn or something. So the data is not telling us the actual story. So if we actually stop spending time looking at the amount of pages they're looking at the time they spent, but look at what they're doing on the website. Well, they actually went into a product page. They clicked 12 different attributes or variants of a product we were showing, and then they actually added it to the cart. They went into the cart and they held their mouse over the checkout button, but they didn't check out. Well, that's a 99% engagement level. They might only spend like 30 seconds doing this, but this visitor is much more focused and valuable than the guy who spent 50 minutes and saw 18 pages. So we need to look at the value that is creating. The actions are creating a certain engagement level and values that we do not see traditionally in Google Analytics. So it's funny with this slide going back and forth, but hey, we get a chance to see some of the slides a few times. So how can the insight then transform our organization? Well, we talked a little about it. I have a customer we recently launched. They're the world's largest manufacturer of playground equipment. And they've been selling playground equipment products for 40 years. The categories was named like in the ERP system. So a lot of their customers would actually spend 12 to 18 months figuring out what to buy to get a new playground, because the customers were not able to actually navigate in a product sense. But the customers can say, hey, I would like a pirate-themed playground with like a wooden ship and out in the sandbox, and the kids can play as pirates and stuff. That's fun. They can understand that. But having a customer that's buying a playground for the first time go in and selecting 48 different products to put together in a playground is too complex. So a lot of this insight and understanding that the users are actually exhibiting a behavior where they're not able to put together products into a complete solution, and then looking at that insight and say, how can we transform the company? So now we're selling solutions, we're selling theme-based playgrounds instead, is a very important way to actually get into a market position where you can sell your products. And we can say we've done the same with content marketing for years, most of us. So we do tips and tricks articles, and we try to give away our valuable information. Then we attract people from search engines because we've written something interesting, and then they learn something from us, and we build pluses on our relation scores. The more pluses we build, the more potential we have to actually get business and customers through, whether it's information, consultancy services, or whatever it is. I think I'm throwing my laptop up after this session, so that's one of it. So, but digital transformation is both about humans and real organizations and thinking differently. It's also about the digital aspects. Of course, I think all of you have heard examples of people going into efficiency, maximize an organization and cutting 500 jobs and stuff because they're doing digital transformation and they're removing aspects and roles and stuff. To be honest, in most cases, when we help organizations to do digital transformation and to build new value chains, we actually create more jobs. But we're creating jobs that are adding more value. So instead of having to do manual stuff and having to spend hours looking for images or doing layouts for your web page in one big Visvik editor box, then we do standardized layouts. We integrate them naturally to the image repository, so you just pick and then it does all the layouting and set it up and stuff like that. So we're saving, let's say we're saving 1.5 hours every time someone is building an article. Then when they build the article, we actually automatically post it to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, to the newsletter, etc. Then we're removing another 1.5 hours of work. So then we've saved 3 hours of work on doing one content marketing post. So those 3 hours of work, instead of just saving them and cutting on the amount of people working in the organization, then we actually spent the 3 hours to build different versions of the same content, to personalize and make it more relevant for more people. So instead of having a 1 or 2% conversion rate, then we might have a 8% conversion rate or 12% conversion rate. So we're spending time differently to try and be more meaningful and have a higher relevance for more people in the process. So, and on to strategy. So what's the strategy overall? Well, it's quite simple. If we're able to identify meaningfully the segments and personas and potential customers that are using our services or reading our website, if we can get that insight, then we can create it into strategy. We can continuously work on that. So that means that if I know that one of my primary segments is like the CEO level people who are going to my site to read something, well, and I'm starting to get data and an informed background of knowing what are they acting on, what are they interested in reading, and why are they doing that, but also where can I find them? Oh, I can actually find the specific CEO types on LinkedIn, for instance. Well, LinkedIn can be very expensive to do advertising on, but if you're picking the right 500 CEOs or 1,000 CEOs or something like that, and you've generated an article that is specifically for those people, and you have a full strategy of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who you're doing it for, most importantly, then it might make a hell of a lot of good sense to actually spend those money on LinkedIn. But if you don't have a strategy that is based on the insights you have, amongst others, from your web platform and your customers, then you're not very efficient in what you're doing. So that's what the strategic part is. So identifying personas and segments, using that to identify important channels. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to tell the stories you're going to tell is very, very important. So, and since the strategy part is, it's just one part of the digital transformation wheel. So again, once we do the strategy, we actually got and implement it. Then we see what it does, and we learn from that, and we create some value, and then we do it again. So for multiple years, when you did A/B split testing on websites, you sort of do an A/B split test, then you would wait 6 months to see the results in Google after you had guessed at doing something, right? So you would have these very, very long circular movements completely based on guesstimation. You're just guessing and seeing if it works. So being able to do it more quickly and adopting, it also follows a strategy of launching a minimal viable product and then seeing how it's being used and learning from that and making it better. So a lot of these things actually tie together. If you attend business conferences and stuff, people are of course talking about the business canvas model, and actually know Chris is doing a session here on the business canvas model. And right now there's a lot of focus on value proposition models. So, and in the business world entirely, so what value are you proposing to a potential customer or partner? And that's very much in focus. Interestingly enough, the way we work with customer-based and story-driven approaches in our industry for years have been doing the same. So when we do a user experience optimization or UX-based processes, we're actually doing it on the same conditions and with the same reasoning that we now see CEOs and companies and organizations starting to change their organizations and companies and working their way into digital transformation by being more coherent in their attempts to get closer to the end customer. So that's an important aspect. How are we on time, Chris? We good? Perfect. So how can the right strategy transform? And you say, well, for the businesses, it's going data driven, and it's actually, I mean, all businesses have an ERP system, and they can tell you, well, our turnover in this type of product is this and this and this. But then when you go out to the company and you sit down for the first time in the workshop and you ask them, so who are your 5 best customers? And we don't know. Well, this customer is good. And we say, well, why is it a good customer? And very few companies are actually able to answer that just right away. So you need to figure it out. So then we end up saying, well, who's your best customer? So what are they buying from you? Why did they decide to buy this specifically from you? Well, what's so special about you and not your competitors? And slowly we can use all of this to build some profiles. Once we build those profiles and we then actually look at the real behavior and we become data-driven, because at first, of course, we're story-driven. We're asking the customers to relay their own stories of their own experiences. And that's the only way to get started. But the instance we can get data-driven, we're actually seeing hardcore data. We're actually seeing real numbers moving. We can actually see if it's right. And then if we do A/B split testing on elements like that, then we're actually verifying. So we're no longer guessing and waiting 6 months and then guessing if it worked. Now we're actually seeing, well, it worked or it didn't work, and why didn't it work? So we have a different approach and different way of doing things. Now, the digital transformation is, of course, a lot of what we do with our contextual marketing platform, is that we're actually not building one website. We're building hundreds of variations of the same website. And I mean, let me give you an example. We have 7 major or primary arts type of users. The 2 outliers, the one is a technical engineer type guy. He's 45 to 55 years old. When he goes to a web shop, he wants all the product filtering as options right away, because he thinks himself that he's qualified to make the decisions of what he's buying. And it needs to be relatively quick as well. So he goes into a product overview, he clicks 7 or 8 filters, he sees the 3 products he might buy, he puts one in the cart, he checks out, and he's gone. Then on the other side of the outliers, we have a female between 35 and 45 who is actually not clicking on the anchor text, who's not using the product filtering, but is clicking on the images, so it's actually browsing visually our website. And these two outliers, they have a fundamentally different way of understanding the world, but we're still building one website for both of them. So that's really problematic. If we then take the generational cleavages into factor as well, then we have the old generation that only reads. We have the middle generation, where I'm also in, where we read first, and if it's very, very good, we might start the video. And then we have the YouTube generation that only watches the video. So if we're building a website with a major important information we want to convey to our potential customers is text-based, and we suddenly have 18% users that are only looking at our videos, then we have a problem. I mean, they don't have a problem. So we consider that there's 7 archetypes of ways of actually understanding and communicating to people in different value propositions, and we combine them with the 3 different age generations, then it's obvious that it is completely and utterly impossible to, hold on, I'm giving up on this last laptop. So, but it's actually impossible to communicate to so many different kinds of people with one website. It's simply not possible. So then you think, yeah, but that's why we're building funnels and tunnels and silos on our website. But hey, silo-based websites are not very good, because people don't go from the front page and into a silo. 70% of the people come from Google, and then they go to a level 4, and now they're stuck in a silo. So what if they're not supposed to go there? What if in that silo you have to actually have 20 different ways of considering or understanding the way you're communicating? So the future's website needs to be based on a different way of doing things based on insights and data. So, so the experience, what we use it for, and I think what's really relevant, is the personalization element, the contextual element. And let me give you some examples. For one of our customers, the playground manufacturer, they also have user testimonials on their site. We all use user testimonials, where a customer or a company will say something about why they're using us as a company. Because that is the digital version of word of mouth, and throughout many, many thousands of years, the best sales tool in the world is word of mouth. So we decided to do user testimonials, or small stories or user cases from our customers or people on our websites, to try and do the same thing online. So, but if you have 100 people visiting the same landing page and you're pulling out a user testimonial, it will not be relevant for all the 100 people. They cannot identify with the person or the company that the story is about. So for one of our clients, for instance, if we can identify the visitor we've never seen before is an architecture company, then instead of just pulling out a random or generic user testimonial, we're actually pulling out a user testimonial from another architect company. If the visitor is an architect company from New York, we're actually pulling out a user testimonial from another architect company in New York. When they get to the website, if the architect company then goes into sport and fitness and urban climbing and stuff, well, then we're actually pulling out a user testimonial from another architect in New York that has done a project with an urban sport and fitness project. Because every time we get closer to being relevant, then we increase the chances of actually converting people. And that can be submissions for forms, for white papers, downloads, newsletters. It can actually also be direct sales and e-commerce solutions. So doing this easily generates results 300, 400, 500, 800% better results. It's drastic and massive. So, but part of understanding this is also when we understand the different kinds of users, we are able to identify their pain points. And why are pain points important? Well, because when people want to buy something or get something and do something, it's because they have a pain point. Something is hurting and they want a solution. One of our clients sells boating equipment. And in Denmark, 3,000-4,000 times a year, a boat will get a specific disease in the boat where you have to treat the boat. And if you don't treat it, then it will rust away and it's never going to be a boat again. So what we find out is that people, one of that's one of the major pain points. And 3,000 to 4,000 times a year, we'll have people showing this behavior in Google. They will actually Google something like, "My boat has gotten osmosis, how can I fix it?" And now they find an article from one of our customers that actually writes about what is osmosis, how does it look on different boats, how can you actually treat it, and by the way, you can buy the product here and here and here. So that means that more than 3,000 times a year they're selling products to cure osmosis in boats. They spend 1.5 hours writing that article, because the article is written based on an identification of a clear user and a clear user type, personas and segment, and understanding the pain points of those users, understanding what is triggering them, why are they writing this in Google, what's the situation, and then delivering the answers. Then you are making a super good business case. So this specific article is generating around 100,000 euros of revenue every year. And it's done at the last 3 years. So now it's generated more than 300,000 euros of revenue, and it took 90 minutes to write. That is a return of investment that is out of this world. But again, it's because we're starting to get data-based. We're starting to understand, we have the insight, and then now we're building up the experience to figure out what can we do with it, how can we change their behavior, and how do we get output out of that. And once we do that, then we go to the next customer, the next potential customer we can do something for. So we do these things, and then we get smarter and wiser, and then we do it for another group of customers, and we get more results there. And that's also why, instead of just being more efficient and firing 80% of our staff, we're actually having to hire more staff, because we find out that when we are more meaningful to people, we will actually sell more products. So a good example, around 5, 6, 7 years ago, when we started doing segmented newsletters, the mass newsletters we sent out to people, like 1 million newsletters, they would do like 0.007 click-through or something like that, almost not worth it. Then all of a sudden we said, hey, let's not send 1 million newsletters out, let's send 10 different newsletters out to 100,000 people each based on their history with us. And suddenly some of our newsletters was doing like 2% or 4% instead of 0.035%, because the more relevant we get, the more results we get. So we've been doing this with newsletters for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We have actually a lot of marketing automation platforms that are doing the same, like HubSpot, Infusionsoft, Mortic, who's always also a former Joomla people. There's a lot of different systems that can do it, and it's very commonly adopted now. It's also integrated to the CRM system in the organization, maybe even to the ERP system as well. But where's the website? Well, we do have a form that is collecting newsletter submissions from our website and then sending it over to our newsletter campaign system. But what about the rest of the website? Why are we not doing anything there? I'm so lost in this slide by now because it keeps going magically back and forth. So yeah, so if we can create meaningful touch points where we're based on identification of the pain points of people, and we can create more meaningfulness and increase the relevance for people, then we will sell more products at the end of the day. And it doesn't matter if the products are shoes or it's stories or if it's services or whatever it is. So yeah, so how are user experiences transformed? Well, there's different cases, businesses, there's be a lot of like production tools and stuff, but actually all of this started many years ago in production systems, like when Coca-Cola, they changed their factory like 50 years ago. So when all the Coca-Colas came on the assembly line, then they actually started to put light through them. And if there was something in the bottle that blocked the light, then the transport conveyor belt would actually open up to one side and the bottle would go out and it would close again. So it started like 40, 50 years ago in production systems. They started to implementing behavioral transformative systems that would actually respond to changes. So now I think the time has come where we start to consider to implement this in our websites and our digital solutions, and it has to be strongly connected to the way we think, to our mindsets and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, telling the right story to the right person at the right time and the right way is selling products. telling the wrong story to the wrong person in the wrong way on the wrong time is not selling products. So it's pretty simple, because we're just doing the same as everyone has been doing for hundreds of years, right? We just need a different technological approach of trying to reason with these obvious things to do. I mean, most of what I've been talking about the last 40 minutes is common sense, but we sort of just forgot it the last 20 years in our IT world. We completely forgot what it means to actually do high relation and high relevancy for customers in our organizations. Or we didn't have the technological means of doing it differently. So just summarize some of the values here in the business transformation. The outside-in perspective is essential. I mean, if you don't have the outside-in perspective, then just stop doing business. Those times are gone and done. So that's the only way to go. Need-based development, again, if you see that, but also it's also, the world is so global now. So let's say tomorrow in Australia, someone posts a picture where half the leg is missing on their cowboy pants, their jeans, and then the picture's posted on Facebook. 32 seconds later, it's in New York. Then 1 minute later, it's in Rome, and 4 minutes later, it's in Denmark, because we are a little slower, so we need 4 minutes. But then it's global. So after 4 minutes, we have a new global demand. The users actually decided by themselves, without being exposed to any form of marketing or branding or whatever, that now they want to buy jeans where half the one leg is missing. So the company who's able to see that first and change and adopt the product base they have to actually start to sell jeans online with half a leg missing is the one getting the cheapest market share available. There is no cheaper market share available than understanding what people want and giving them that. And that's why that the user's need-based development is very, very important. It's also about simplified value chains, because when you're constantly evolving and adopting and changing what you do based on what people want, you need to make sure that you have a system and a process and an integration of processes, a full value chain that actually allows you to go in that direction. So if you have a very static system where you cannot adopt and modify and change, then you cannot be very responsive. So, I mean, we're building responsive websites in templates, and we're responding to viewports, screen sizes for years. Maybe we should start being more responsive to people and to human beings. So that's sort of the overall takeaway. So the digital experience transformation down here, also very obvious. For a lot of our business-to-business clients, digital self-service. I mean, a lot of companies are open from 8 till 4, you can call them up. But what if the customer has a need at 6 o'clock or at 10 o'clock in the night or Sunday afternoon and no one is picking up the phone? Then they're just going somewhere else. So having 24/7 self-service, access to copies of invoices and whatever. I mean, some of the things we're very good at in the IT and web industry, but other things we can do even better at. One of the first questions I often ask in companies is, what was the 5 most frequent questions you got on your telephone the last week? And then by writing those 5 questions down and answers and using that to understand why people are interacting with the company and how we can help them to fulfill more doing self-service or self-education or making life easier is very, very important. So let's skip to my last slide here. So yeah, it isn't a goal, it's an ongoing process. So that means that we're never actually going to finish it, are we? Because technology changes, and as technology changes, we get new opportunities of means of actually doing this, but it also means that our employees or the people that work with the systems also need to learn and adapt to these things. So it's something we're gradually, constantly working with, evolving with, getting smarter, wiser, more experience, more insight. And then tomorrow someone posts a new video in Australia. I don't know why it's Australia, but it's always Australia, I guess. And then we use that to get even smarter, right? So we keep going back, smaller steps, but more steps, and repetition creates outcome. So and that was sort of the last thing I had to say. So I hope I've opened some minds to maybe thinking a little different, considering some other options of how you can actually build websites or digital platforms or products or whatever. And you've taken something from here. You can follow us a bit on our ASEA, on our social media. You can come by our booth and talk to one of my team members there. I don't have time to be in my booth here because I'm actually working as one of the organizers. So yeah, so this is my 1 hour breakaway. So any questions, or are your brains so numb and hammered out that I will get them later over a cup of coffee? I think, yeah?
You mentioned how important insights are. Do you recommend any tools to gather that insight? I mean, for example, I know you can use Facebook Pixel to then target the people who do certain things on your website. What else can you use?
I think that right now, most technological options are focused on account-based marketing, meaning that if I know who you are, like you visit my page, I put a pixel on, I put a cookie on you, and then when you go out to other websites, I will follow you with my advertisement, etc. So then I know who you are. If in a business-to-business context, if you go to my website and you log in, then I know who you are. I can figure out what type of customer are you, and then I can start to show you relevant products. So most of the technological platforms today are actually focused primarily on account-based marketing, where you can say the pages that are not using anything are maybe converting 1%. Then if you're doing account-based marketing, you can maybe do 4%. But I'm actually talking about from the very first visit, where you know nothing about people, they actually leave a behavioral pattern, the way they're clicking around on your website, the way they do things, where they came from, where they live, which language is on the machine, what device they're using. All of these things are actually able to increase the 4% or 6% you have in account-based marketing, and maybe make that 20% or 24, 25%. But right now, I think, and went to Content Marketing World in Cleveland a few months ago, went to Martech in Boston 1 month ago, and then went to Shop Talk Europe. And I can tell that we're the only ones on the planet that has a platform that is doing that natively right now. So it's not quite mainstream yet. Right now you still have to have 7 different experts hired in your company, and one that can do really complex stuff with Google Analytics, one that can work in this system and this and this.
How are you tracking that?
We actually, in our case with our SEO platform, we're actually doing it within the Joomla website. So SEO is installed in Joomla, then you have all the analytics, conversion numbers, engagement levels, A/B split testing. We have everything inside the platform. Because we don't think that's also one of the gaps between technology and people. If you need 7 experts to understand something and translate that into a production company of a medium size, that's not a realistic setup, is it? So you need to have tools that are actually integrated and working, where when you write a new article, you can actually see how well did all your other articles actually do in the last 2 years, because then you learn from what you're doing yourself, and every time you write a new article, it becomes better and better. So in our platform, you can actually open up each article and see who's read my article. I'd like to see from specific countries or engagement levels or whatever. But right now there isn't a lot of platforms out there. There are a few systems trying to do it remotely via JavaScript, like Site Optimizer and a few more. And then you load in a JavaScript that loads in a platform from them. And then you can sort of put fake windows over your website areas where you're alternating things. But because it's not natively happening within the web platform, then it's really hard to make it really good and get a lot of outcome out of it. So I think in 2 years, 2.5 years, this is the new way of building websites. If you're not building contextual aware websites in 2.5 years, find something else to do. I mean, go to or show people to go to Wix.com and build their own website that can do nothing. So I think there's a big game changer coming. It's a whole new generation. It's a new mindset of doing things. But right now, I think we're the only native solution on the planet that is actually doing it. Yes?
How does GDPR affect your ability to track what users are doing without actually having to be, tell them?
Yeah. We decided a couple of years ago to not use cookies. So we're not using cookies. I understand why you're using cookies if you're using them to identify 4% of the visitors to do account-based marketing. But since I'm actually looking at all of the 100% of the users and based on their behavior, I mean, you can go through a VPN or web proxy or whatever, but I can still look at your behavior. Your behavior is not going to change. And when I modify and accommodate my website based on your behavior, then I'm doing a lot more meaningful stuff than if I'm only identifying people via cookies. So we're not tracking people by cookies.
Okay, so how do you find out who they are subsequently?
We have a web service called SEIO, where we actually look at the IP addresses, and if we can trace the IP address back to a company organization, then we actually pull the company data into the platform. So when you look at the visitor flow, you can see identified companies from the specific industries and stuff like that. So that's one of the things. We're also using geographical information, device information, referral source information. So let's say all of us, we have like in the bottom of our pages, we're hiding this little link, follow us on LinkedIn, right? Why we're hiding it at the bottom? Because it's not very relevant for everyone, right? But let's say I have a visitor who's coming from LinkedIn to my website. Then I put it up in the top, the module goes in the top instead of say, hey, follow us on LinkedIn. And now I have 800% more followers on LinkedIn over 30 days because I'm actually showing it to the people where it's relevant. So, I mean, every one of us, we're doing like this prioritized content. This is our primary audience, our secondary audience, and then we hide the linking button down here. So, but that's because we only have one size and one model of doing it. So we have to prioritize what we're doing to try and remain the most relevant for most people. But now if we can suddenly change everything around based on who it is and what we can see and know about them, then we create completely different outputs. So it's a massively different way of building websites.
So what content does Google see?
What content is good?
Yeah, what content does Google see? Because when Google visits your site,
Yeah.
you have a hierarchy.
Yeah.
SEO oriented.
Yeah. Well, you could say, you're borderlining or you're fringing into cloaking at some point, because you can actually replace full landing pages. You do in our platform, we have A/B split testing. We can actually do full landing pages. You can even replace categories. But when we do landing pages, we often work with the call to action modules. So for Joomla, for instance, Joomla has around 2,500 modules on the JED extension directory. Any of those 2,500 modules you install into Joomla, you can go into our SEO platform and just import them. And suddenly you have a tab called display options. Now you can control all your modules based on behavior and all the data and everything you have. So now you can differentiate everything. So let's say like the newsletter module, instead of just having one newsletter module, now I have 6 different newsletters. And then depending on people's behavior and all the data I have, I will show them one of 6 different newsletters. So already before they sign up to the newsletter, I'm already differentiating which newsletter I'm communicating to them, the story I'm telling to get them to sign up to the newsletter. So if I can then go from 4% identified people in my account-based marketing to 16, 20% because I'm already working out here, then I will create 400, 500% bigger results. It's a massive game changer. But of course, if you're showing 6 different C2A modules, Google is not seeing all of that. But you can actually also decide which version you're showing Google. But one of the things we also did was we worked a lot with many-to-many relations. All CMSs on the planet only has many-to-one relations or one-to-one relations. We actually have many-to-many relations. So when the search engines comes in and follow all the different pathways around, then the semantical understanding of what you're doing, why you're doing it, is much, much closer to the way people are thinking when they go to the search engine, because the content hierarchies naturally will actually reflect that way of thinking. So the organic search rankings is a lot better and a lot higher. So I spend a lot of time building organic content hierarchies to match the way people are thinking and stuff. So that's one of my little pets. So, okay, a last question, anyone? Or we'll wrap it up before Chris gets desperate. So thank you very much. It was fun talking to you.